Alright, a very warm welcome to the January casual tournament in Offworld Trading Company. We have, in this game, Scott Call, this is round one, Scott Call, 2D-back, Steph Verzelen and Antario. We saw a couple of these players last week in the Newcomers Tournament, and a couple were too experienced for the Newcomers Tournament. But here is the first of the maps, and Black Magic, who's alongside me for this one. We have some scientific spots.
I wouldn't be surprised if we saw 4 scientists
Yeah,
at this point, because we have nukes on the market. We also have some core samples as well. Oh, we have a scavenger,
yeah,
and that was a relatively early scavenger too. So they Scott Call might have a death wish there with having the
nukes as well. Oh my gosh, yeah. So a high and a medium carbon is really good, but yeah, there are nukes, and that's going to be a big problem, especially as there are 2 scientists. There's not really anyone else to nuke in this game. Steph Verzelen with the first of the founds, and I'm not sure about taking it for that amount of money. It's not that much better than the other science spots, of which there were at least 2. Antario's found, I would have placed it maybe a little bit to the north. I think he crushed a little bit of water there,
yes,
which means that he's got a little bit of a problem. I don't know whether that was a misclick, but the fact that he's done that means that he doesn't have adjacent water, and he doesn't even have adjacent iron. So he's taking the 2 remote steel, which are a little bit further away. Scott Call gets to level 2 first, as you probably would expect from a scavenger player against expansives and scientists. But hot on his heels was Steph, along with Toodback as well, whose start, I mean, it's a reasonable play, I think, to go expansive there. I maybe would have gone for another scientist, but you're in the middle of the map and you've got reasonable resources around you.
So one thing I would say in defense of 2D-back's found is the fact that he can make an early play for what's going to be a very, very, very strong power market by going expansive. Just because you can build those geothermals a little quicker than other people, and you certainly have a couple more claims that you're going to be able to use for those. The good thing about this is you have 2 scientific players. They're going to be extremely heavy in power, and you have a power colony. So you can see we're at the beginning of day 2. Power is already over at 109, and
yeah, it's going to be climbing really quickly as well. Scott Call's elemental quarry got nuked, as we probably had expected to happen very early in the game. Steph was the culprit there. Steph going into food that's not enormously profitable. But again, I mean, there's just aren't a whole lot of high prices on the map right now. Really, its power is where it's at, and where it's going to be at for the next couple of HQ levels as people get into that. So it'll be interesting to see how people handle the whole power situation.
And that bodes very poorly for Steph at the moment. He may have a very good spot right here, and he's just expanded and he's putting down 2 claims. I really want to see what these 2 claims are, because I think it would be 100% absolute wrong move to go into reactors at this point, considering how much power they use and
so I think actually
how high that power spot is.
He was going to put power down and thought better of it. Instead, he's going with a 3rd farm, which is okay. I'd like to see solar panels, though, at some point from him, just because it's reasonably affordable. It's not that affordable, though, for him to get into those, because aluminum's high as well. This is kind of an interesting auction, because aluminum seems like it's going to stick, at least for the time being. People need to get power down, which means demand is a little bit higher. So it might be okay to bid on this, especially as it's also a water tile.
Let's go back to Steph's base really quickly. One of the things that I would like to point out, and he is, after all, going into those 2 reactors. So I think he built that farm and then tore it down. The thing is, those reactors are going to be making decent money, but remember, he was the first to found, and he has 0 power up at this point. So that's really going to funnel money into 2D-back's pocket.
Yeah,
moment,
it is.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. Now he's going to have to defend against all of the attacks. However, he just got a free mutiny from Scott Call. and he's going to be able to defend those unless they, somebody tries to power surge them at this point. So
yeah, although I mean he's got so much steel up as well. Like he's going really, really heavily into steel, and I'm not sure I'm okay with this just because of the power price being so high. These steel mills each are consuming $70 worth of power, and he's got 5 of them. So like he's not even running, or he wasn't even running a power surplus. There's a big fight over this geotherm. Steph has taken it, at least for the time being. So 2D back, despite investing those 2 claims into 2 geotherms, not even running a power surplus, he's running a slight deficit still, and power continues to climb above 250. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is one of those instances where if I'm Scott Call, of course, all of his stuff just got frozen right there, which hurts a lot. That really hurts a lot. What I would like to see out of Scott Call is, and by the way, I'm actually very surprised that his high quarry is still up, because we know there's only been one Goon Squad purchased in the game, and
yeah, he doesn't have it defended.
And that quarry does not. If that quarry does not get nuked, I will be a very sad person. But anyway, so what I was looking at is you've got Steph, who presumably is selling down all of his food and taking care of some of the food demand. I would almost like to see Scott Call go into a triangle of wind and take advantage of that 267. Although that being said, he is in 60k debt, so I'm going to scratch what I just told you.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a huge amount of benefit to that, even with that 60k debt. We did have some solar panels coming down from 2D back. They got frozen out in a hurry, as you probably would expect. We also have a patent lab for Steph. So he's going to be the first into a patent lab. Antario has that single solar panel, and I'd really like that to get a friend very soon, because he can. He's also got the what does he have? He's just got the steel, so it's so he's not actually consuming that much power. He's in just quite a bit of debt, 77,000's worth of debt. This is an interesting auction too, actually. Slant drilling is going to be interesting for the scientists in particular, and yeah, Antario takes it. So I'd really like to see another solar panel now, just because this amount of debt is getting to be a problem. It's above 100k now for him.
Yes. Now, ironically, the person that I was most concerned about debt with, Steph, has the best debt rating at this point, because other people have ignored power, and Steph was able to mutiny that out.
And he's taken another geotherm as well. So he's in a really good position to make money from this power price.
And we're also worth noting that he's the only player on the board that can really make a lot of money at this point from the fact that he doesn't have that high water price, which is still, it's still $45. So he can make a lot of money on food, and he is auto. Let's see. Actually, it's interesting.
Well, Antario is actually making a lot of food as well. The problem he's got is that it's not adjacent to his base, so of course these pirates are going to be a big problem for him. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple more pirates come down, because that is very vulnerable food and also very valuable food that can just be pirated away. So we'll see if that happens.
So, worth noting, remember, we were a little bit critical in terms of how much steel 2D back was going into, and maybe that it seemed like it was an over-exaggeration. The nice thing about that is he was in steel for so long, he was able to just continually produce it, save it all up, and he's the first person to HQ 5. So he's got a whole lot more claims than everybody else, and he can take advantage of a lot of those prices. So he's going into some of the most lucrative markets. Like he's got 3 glass right there, which he'll need to try to defend that. I would actually like to see, instead of a triangle there, I'd like to see it in a line, just to make sure you can protect it. That being said, he has so many claims at this particular point that he's going to be making a whole lot of money at this point. And let's check. I didn't actually check off-worlds, but off-worlds are decent for an oxygen send. They're up at 32k right now per launch.
Yeah,
so
and it's going to be reasonably straightforward for people to produce oxygen as well, just because there's so much water on the map, and there's a couple of scientists who can do that very easily. 2D back is also in a pleasure dome. He's going to be the first into that market, which is becoming a really good market. We've got a solar flare here, and 2D back again is really benefiting from that, because he's making 7 surplus power a second. which is really destroying that debt rating of his, all the way down to AA and I think AAA very shortly. Steph, by the way, in terms of patents, he went into perpetual motion first, which I like quite a lot given that high power price. But again, he's not quite going to be able to make money from this power by the looks of it. He is in a position to take this claim for auction, which is going to go for 28 at least. So he's in a good position to take this debt on. And he's going to get teleportation as well very shortly, so he's going to be able to plan, at least to some extent, to have some remote claims with that teleportation.
Near and dear to my heart, I would like to point out 2D-Back has the only Pleasure Dome at the moment, although Steph will be going into one, thank goodness, because that Pleasure Dome is making 291 per second, and the power is dropping, so
yeah,
it's
that's
making
the thing.
More and more money for him.
That's the thing, 2D-Back was first into that market just as power was crashing, so really, really good timing for him there, not taking on very much debt, and able to get the Pleasure Dome down. Antario has delayed his level 5 upgrade because he paid off a bunch of his debt, and I think he probably had to do that as well. Oh, actually, was that the solar panels? It might have been the solar panels instead. I'm not absolutely sure, but he's in a safe amount of debt now, albeit that he's quite behind. He's an HQ level behind everyone else in the game, which isn't where you want to be. The mutiny falls onto the Pleasure Dome, so Scott Call also saw that as being a very valuable thing to have. There is another of the nukes that come down. He actually got his water nuked on a little bit earlier on, Scott Call, rather than the carbon. But now he's operating off just 2 lows and the trace. It's a little bit late, but carbon's still at 70, so it's going to be really hard for him to transition into those offworlds.
And this is the point of the game where if I'm Antario or if I'm Steph, with nukes at 6k, this is where you want to start picking on 2D-Back and Scott Call in terms of nuking all of those things out and raising the prices for things like water, for instance. You've got Scott Call is locked into all of the claims that they're going to get. This is where, and 2D-Back likewise, so if you can take out some of that water, they can't get more claims without going into an auction. So this is where I would love to see the high water nuked out for 2D-Back, and Antario, Antario certainly has the ability to go and, I think he has the cooldown right now. And there we go, we have an underground nuke.
There is the nuke. That was Steph nuking out 2D-Back's water, so he sees that, and he sees 2D-Back as the big threat in this game. 2D-Back is in an off-world as well. He's put it in the colony. It looks like a patent lab to everyone else at the moment, and it's quite well disguised actually, because it is next to that laboratory, which gives the boost to the patent lab. Does anyone have any spies out on it? I'm gonna go with no. They do not. Who's got the spy at the moment? There's one spy on the map somewhere.
And it's got to be over. It's got to be over where the off-world is. Somebody's got to have that spied. Hold on, let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm trying to see where the spy is.
So Scott is.
Oh, there's a spy on the geo. So the only spy in the game right now is Steph's spy on the geotherm of 2D-Back from earlier in the game. So nobody has it spied out. It is gooned, it is hologrammed obviously as well, this off-world, and it is now launching. He's launched one food and then he's going to launch oxygen from there. So. Fair enough, I guess. Doesn't want to. So
I like 2D-Back's strategy right here, where he got that. He has that adrenaline boost, but he has not quite used it yet. I like that because you can go ahead and you can purchase another goon squad first, boost it out, and then make sure you get the full benefit of all of the.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of everything.
I imagine that's what the plan is going to be. I wonder if he launched food. So this is kind of interesting. So he launched food even though it was clearly worse than oxygen. I wonder if he did that not to. Money. Oh, he didn't have enough money. Okay.
Yeah, if you look at his money right now, he's very short on cash.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wondered if he did it to not tip players off, that there was an off-world on the board, which would have been an interesting reason.
No,
it's more likely.
He's already switched over to oxygen at this point, and the reason was he did not have enough oxygen saved up for that particular point, so he just had to launch whatever he could launch, which was an excellent move, really.
So overall state of the game, Antario again has fallen into that D level of debt, which is going to be a big problem for him. He doesn't have teleportation, and he has those remote claims. I wonder if he can hook them up. He's got 5 claims that he needs to use. So I wonder if he can make that happen. I'm not sure. Steph defending themselves. Scott Call also defending himself, but he's in a D level of debt as well. He's in 200k's worth of debt, in fact. So cheap stock price, but he needs to make a lot of money to negate that debt as quickly as he can. Steph also now in an off-world. He's just put one down on top of that farm. So we will see whether that remains unmolested, at least for the time being.
And surprisingly, nobody is challenging 2D-Back's off-world. They don't actually see that it's off-world, and it's over at the colony, and it's not.
Like I say,
it's not one of those places you would necessarily look for it.
It's really well disguised there because it's next to the laboratory, so it makes sense that he would have a patent lab there. But it's also next to the warehouse. It also has the hologram on it, so it's going to be really hard, I think, for players to be tipped off that that is actually an off-world. Again, spies are now at 14k. No one has a spy on it.
And this is, and nor would they necessarily think to spy. I would imagine other people are taking a look at everything around his base, and since expansives have so many claims, your tendency is spy all around the base, particularly right around, people have a tendency to build their off-worlds directly next to their base, even if they don't get thinking machines for some reason. So if you don't get thinking machines, then
so
go build it
the second off-world that 2D-Back is building now is spied out by Steph. So Steph knows where that is,
and so that
there's going to be black market on it.
That off-world there is actually the off-world location there is a mistake.
Yeah, no, it definitely is.
You do not have thinking machines. Steph has thinking machines, so Steph has every reason to. And interesting that that's the one that he boosted out. So he finally used the adrenaline boost over there, and I don't actually, well, I agree with it in terms of, you're tipping everybody your hand when you have a goon like that. So I guess it makes more sense than boosting out the one next to the colony, because nobody knows that that one's an off-world. So that was actually good.
Yeah, you definitely want to do that, and I don't know whether is he gonna. No, he's not gonna buy another. Oh, he's got a goon on it again, so he's got it defended, at least in the short term. Some troubling things for Scott Call and Antario. They both just took a D debt tick. Scott Call is now in a huge amount of debt, 300k. He's making a lot of money, but again, he's not going to stay in this game very much longer with a stock price like that if he's not able to invest it.
So 2D-Back recognizing that Steph is going to be the biggest challenger in this particular, in this particular game, and I like the. Actually, I'm trying to think if I like the strategy of going after Steph. I'm not sure I do. You could go after Scott Call or Antario, who have a lot cheaper stock prices, and you could boost your stock price up a bunch. If you were, and furthermore, you'd be able to complete the buy earlier on them versus Steph.
I think that might be true in Antario's case. I don't think it's true in Scott Call's case, and he has just paid a bunch of his debt off. So that stock price is climbing in a hurry, and you can see that's going to reach, what, $28 by the time the correction is complete. So it's not going to be that cheap to get into Scott. Maybe it was cheap enough to get into Antario that you can justify it, but Steph, I mean, really, Antario is not a threat at all in this game. I'm sorry to say. He doesn't have the income-earning, really, potential to trouble either 2D-Back or Steph in this game. He doesn't have any off-worlds. He doesn't really have any advanced buildings at all, apart from that single hacker array. And the other stuff that he has just isn't making all that much money. So it's not that lucrative, really, to go into Antario.
And you can see that 2D-Back can purchase Steph before Steph's going to be able to do that, mostly because Steph went into the two off-world markets a whole lot later than 2D-Back did, and so yeah, as long as you can get a buy, Steph is the most profitable person that you can do it, and so yeah, it ends up being a good buy in this particular case.
Yeah, 2D-Back had the mutiny, in fact, had 2 mutinies saved up, so he can take his off-world back pretty much whenever it comes under attack. There's still a completely unmolested off-world that even has a launch bonus at the colony. It now has more of a launch bonus even because there's a second warehouse that's gone just next to it. So 2D-Back really in a good position in this game. He's not very far away from being able to complete this buy either. He's maybe 150,000 away. Steph is trying to buy into 2D Back, but he's got such a long way to go, and I think 2D Back really is in the box seat in this game. Scott Call does have a bunch of cash as well, so maybe he can do something interesting too. He does have that carbon income too, even though he's been nuked out. And carbon, if you look at the price of it, is at $300.
So let's take a look at Antario and Scott Call. So let's say you are in the position of Antario or Scott Call. What can you do when you have two of the leading players duking it out? In this particular case for Antario, you can buy up the other two pieces of your stock, which are incredibly cheap. And I'm actually surprised that Scott Call hasn't taken some of his cash and tried to purchase it. The other thing that Scott Call can end up doing is start buying into 2D Back, which is going to help out Steph. But more importantly, if 2D Back gets the buy on Steph, you have a bunch of money into the leader. So at least you can try to get their stock before it increases dramatically, because as soon as he gets Steph, who has 2 off-worlds, as well as teleportation and a whole bunch of scientific advantage.
Yeah, and he's running out of time.
Yeah.
He's running out of time to do that as well. 2D Back on 93%. Scott Call wasn't launching until a second ago. Now he's launching from his off-world, but that was a good 30 seconds where it was idle. So Scott Call is now launching again. He does have 400,000 in the bank, so if he gets into 2D Back soon, he might be able to do something in this game, but it's going to be really difficult if 2D Back gets to that buy before he gets any pieces of stock at all. Antario, I think, I'm afraid, is kind of just out of this game at this point. He was auto-paying debt, which is why he couldn't buy his stock up. He only ever had 10,000 in the bank. So maybe that's something to look at for future games. That's one thing that auto-paying debt really limits you in doing. Is actually buying stuff and investing into yourself.
I would like to note that Scott Call's off-world placement is fantastic. Both of those are out in a place where you wouldn't necessarily look for him. Now those holograms, one of them is hologrammed as an optimization center. The other one is a water pump. The second one is obviously better because it can look like a water pump. So that was a little bit better placement. That being said, both of those could be detected by a well-placed spy.
Yeah, absolutely. But no one has spied them out just yet. 2D Back does have the money to buy Steph as soon as this launch finishes. He has it now, but he would have to cancel launches. So I think as soon as this happens, we're going to see 2D Back effectively win this game by hitting that big red button right there and buying Steph out. Which I'm expecting him to do really soon.
So in this case, if you look at Scott Call's position, Scott Call had every advantage to be able to buy into 2D Back before that buy is made, and that's more of the correct play in that point, where you buy into it because 2D Back has to go and complete the buy on Steph.
This is interesting. 2D Back is not mutinying back his off-world that's next to his base. I don't know whether he didn't notice that it was mutinied because it happened while he was buying Steph. But that's potentially a big deal. Scott Call has control of 3 off-worlds right now, and 2D Back only has the 1. Scott Call has a small lead in cash, but again, he's got a big mountain to climb in terms of the stock price. But if he gets those full launches off, maybe he can pull himself back into this one.
And I'm thinking that the reason that 2D Back is not mutinying that back is either number one, he knows he has an advantage, so you just let this one run out, let somebody buy that a 70k mutiny, and then take it back. So that way you're sapping people's cash. The other thing is he may just not notice that it's mutinied and all the because that mutiny was done right as the buy on Steph was completed. So that's a distinct possibility as well.
And there might be something to be said for not mutinying it back, just because it might be gooned as well. And that's a big problem if you get your mutiny gooned, or if you get it taken away, and then on your own off-world, and then that's a huge problem because you're giving someone else a mutiny that they can mutiny again,
And
you're
that
getting
is a
whole
very
bunch of
good
money.
point, because you've got mutinies that are 70k and
Yeah.
goons that are 50k.
Only 50k, so that would have been a big swing if that had happened. As it is, I think Toodback has enough to get this one finished. He's also got the very lucrative subsidiary in the shape of Steph, bringing him in 1600 a second, along with those 2 off-worlds, or 1 off-world for the time being at least. But he has a bunch of other advantages, and he's going to be able to take this one, I think, quite comfortably. Antario, I'm afraid, just never quite got back in the game after getting into that early D level of debt. He took huge debt ticks, and he basically had to spend the whole mid-game and some of the late game paying his debt off, so not really able to get anything done there.
Okay, so taking a look at Antario's base, let's take a look at what Antario could do in terms of improving. There are a significant number of plains in the north portion of his base that don't really have any water, and at one point those were actually chemicals. When those were chemicals, Antario didn't necessarily have he did not have carbon scrubbing, and so that's why the carbon price is as high as it is, and it's been like that for a while. It essentially fed a lot of money into Scott Call's pocket by doing that. And if you notice, they're still on right now, and they're still losing about 70 per second, and they're not very, they're obviously not very lucrative.
Yeah.
So in terms of what you could do instead is there's that when you have a black market cooldown, I mean, granted, he was in D for quite a long time, so he could not use the black market. One thing you can do is use that core sample, and if you can just hit 1 water over in that general area, then
if you have
he's
slant
the one
drilling.
that was the beneficiary of slant drilling. So that's that's what you would end up doing, and then you're also not susceptible to the pirates.
Absolutely. I want to point out that that Scott Call did pull off a mutiny goon on the off-world of Toodback just at the end of the game. Completely futile, as it turned out, but he at least got the satisfaction of doing that. But Toodback wins the game anyway. It's well played by him. Able to ride that expansive to a win. Saw that Steph was the big competition in the early game with the scientist, with the advantages in the late game, and also he was only just behind Toodback, getting into those off-worlds. And honestly, this off-world at the colony that Toodback had might have just won in the game, in the sense that it was completely unmolested the whole game. Nobody saw that it was an off-world. Nobody spied it out at any point. It still has its original goon on it, and the fact that it was getting a 20% bonus to launch speed as well, just really underlines the fact that it made him so much money.
That was incredibly subtle. That was fantastic. That was fantastic positioning. At the time it was built, there was only a very small bump in there, and it could look like a patent lab, so people wouldn't necessarily think about it. Yeah. And that being said, you didn't have all of the patents taken, so it could still look like a patent lab at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Didn't arouse any suspicion at all. Over $1 million in that game for Toodback off-world were his earnings. So that's game 1. Well played, Toodback. He takes that one from the other 3.